Maya's blood turned to ice when she saw the man crouched beside her 11-year-old daughter at Riverside Elementary. Even from across the schoolyard, even after 12 years, she recognized David Sterling immediately. The same strong jawline, the same kind brown eyes, the same distinctive zigzag cowlick that he was now pointing to in fascination as he looked at Zoe's identical hair pattern. "We match," she heard Zoe exclaim cheerfully, completely oblivious to the earth-shattering moment unfolding before her mother's horrified eyes. Maya forced herself to walk across that schoolyard, her legs feeling like lead, her heart hammering against her ribs. But as David looked up and their eyes met, she was transported back to a September evening 12 years ago that had changed the course of her entire life. She had been 22 then, adjusting her black dress one final time before stepping into the gleaming ballroom of the Meridian Hotel. The annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Crystal chandeliers casting dancing shadows across marble floors, the soft murmur of polite conversation mixing with gentle notes from a string quartet. Maya clutched her volunteer coordinator badge, reminding herself she was there to help raise money for underprivileged kids, not to gawk at the wealthy elite. "Maya." Jennifer, the foundation's event director, had called out, hurrying over with a clipboard. "Thank God you're here. We need someone to handle the silent auction table near the back. Can you manage that?" Of course, Maya had smiled, grateful for something to focus on. She'd been volunteering with Children's Hope for 2 years, ever since her sophomore year at community college. Working with children had always been her calling, even if her tight budget meant she could only afford part-time classes while working at a daycare center. The evening had progressed smoothly until disaster struck. The projector for the main presentation malfunctioned just as they were about to showcase the foundation's achievements. Maya found herself troubleshooting the technical issue, her business administration coursework finally proving useful in an unexpected way. Having trouble with that? She'd looked up to find a man in an impeccably tailored navy suit watching her with genuine concern. He was tall, maybe early 30s, with kind brown eyes and that distinctive zigzag cowlick that made his otherwise perfectly styled hair endearingly imperfect. "Just a loose connection, I think," Maya had replied, adjusting a cable behind the screen. "There, got it. Welcome back, Golden Family. If you're new here, you've just discovered a channel dedicated to bringing you the most emotional, romantic, and life-changing stories that will keep you captivated from beginning to end. Subscribe **** and hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest heart-stopping stories. Now, let's get back to the story. The projector hummed to life, displaying the foundation's logo clearly. A small cheer went up from nearby staff members. "Impressive," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm David Sterling." Maya's breath had caught. David Sterling, she knew that name. Sterling Enterprises was one of the city's most successful tech companies, and one of the foundation's biggest donors. She'd processed his donation checks herself. "Maya Johnson," she'd replied, shaking his hand and hoping her nervousness didn't show. "I'm a volunteer coordinator. The woman who keeps everything running smoothly, then. I'm grateful for people like you, Maya. This foundation means a lot to me." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that surprised her. She'd expected arrogance, maybe condescension from someone of his stature. Instead, she found herself drawn into conversation with a man who spoke passionately about education reform and seemed genuinely interested in her experiences working with children. The way he spoke about those children, the genuine emotion in his voice, it made her see him not as the untouchable CEO from Society Pages, but as someone who truly cared about making a difference. When the formal program ended and guests began moving toward the reception, David had turned to her with nervous energy. "I know this might be presumptuous, but would you like to get some air? The balcony overlooks the city, it's quite a view." Maya had hesitated. She should be helping with cleanup, making sure auction items were properly cataloged. But something about David's expression, hopeful yet respectful, made her nod. There was an electricity between them that she'd never experienced before, a connection that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The hotel's terrace was nearly empty, just a few couples enjoying the warm September evening. The city sprawled below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The gentle breeze carried jasmine scent from the hotel's gardens, and somewhere in the distance, soft jazz music drifted from another event. "It's beautiful," Maya had breathed, leaning against the stone railing. "It is," David had agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her rather than the view. They talked until nearly midnight, and Maya found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. About her dreams of becoming a social worker, about her fears that she'd never make the kind of difference she wanted to make in the world. David listened with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only person in the universe. "You could do so much good," David had said softly, his voice filled with conviction. "I can see it in the way you talk about the children. They're lucky to have someone who cares like you do." The sincerity in his words made her chest warm. Here was this successful, accomplished man telling her that her dreams mattered, that her work had value. When was the last time someone had looked at her like that, like she was capable of changing the world? David shared his plans to expand Sterling Enterprises' community outreach programs, his vision for using technology to bridge educational gaps in underserved communities. But more than that, he talked about his loneliness, about how success had brought him everything except genuine connection. "I've been to 100 events like tonight," he'd admitted, his fingers tracing patterns on the stone railing. "Met countless people who want something from me, business deals, donations, social connections. But I've never met anyone who made me forget about all of that. Until tonight." Maya's heart had raced. Was this really happening? Was David Sterling this incredible man who could have anyone really interested in her? The way he looked at her made her feel beautiful, important, like she mattered in a way that went beyond her volunteer work or modest accomplishments. When he offered to drive her home, Maya almost said no. But something about the evening felt magical, suspended outside of real life. She found herself accepting, settling into the leather seat of his BMW with a sense of unreality. They sat outside her modest apartment building for another hour, conversation flowing as easily as it had all evening. "I've never talked to anyone like this," Maya had admitted as the clock showed well past 1 in the morning. "I feel like I've known you forever." "I feel the same way," David had said softly. "Maya, I know this might sound crazy, but tonight has been the most real conversation I've had in years." The vulnerability in his voice, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and rare, made Maya's resolve crumble. When he walked her to her door and in the soft glow of the porch light kissed her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. It was gentle at first, questioning, and when she responded, it deepened into something that made her entire body come alive. She could taste the wine they'd shared on the terrace, could feel the warmth of his hands as they framed her face like she was something delicate and treasured. Before she fully processed what was happening, she was inviting him inside, her heart pounding not just with desire but with the overwhelming rightness of the moment. This wasn't just physical attraction. This was connection, the kind of soul-deep recognition that poets wrote about and she'd never believed actually existed. Maya had never been intimate with anyone before. At 22, she'd focused on her studies and work, never finding anyone who made her feel the way David did in just one evening. When she invited him inside, her hands were trembling, but not from fear. From anticipation, from the certainty that this moment was meant to happen. David seemed to sense her inexperience without her having to say anything. He was incredibly gentle, patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished every step of the way. His touch was reverent, like he understood the gift she was giving him. What should have been awkward became beautiful, a dance of discovery and tenderness that left her breathless and transformed. Afterward, they lay entwined on her narrow bed, talking softly as dawn crept through her curtains. David traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and Maya had never felt so complete, so perfectly where she belonged. "I should go," David had said reluctantly as morning light filled the room, but his arms tightened around her as if he couldn't bear to let her go. "But I'd like to see you again, Maya." She nodded, still dizzy from the night's events, and gave him her phone number with hands that shook slightly. After he left, she sat in her small kitchen, replaying every moment, every touch, every whispered word. The taste of his kiss still lingered on her lips, and she could smell his cologne on her skin. For the first time in her life, Maya understood what it meant to fall completely, irrevocably in love. Maya floated through the morning in a haze of blissful contentment. Every surface in her small apartment seemed to hold traces of David. The rumpled sheets that still carried his scent, the coffee mug he'd used while they talked as sunrise painted her kitchen golden, the way her lips still tingled from his goodbye kiss. She caught herself smiling at nothing, replaying the way he'd looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. She'd given him something precious, her first time, her trust, her heart, and it had felt perfect. More than perfect. It felt like destiny. Maya was folding laundry when her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Jessica. The message made her smile. Jessica was always sending her celebrity gossip and local news updates, usually accompanied by dramatic commentary. "OMG girl, did you see the news? David Sterling announced his engagement to Vanessa Whitmore this morning. It's all over social media. That Lucky Witch is going to be so rich." The laundry basket slipped from Maya's hands, clothes scattering across her living room floor. For a moment she couldn't process the words. They seemed to float in front of her eyes without meaning, like a foreign language she couldn't decode. David Sterling. Engagement. This morning. With trembling fingers she pulled up the local news website. The page loaded slowly, each second stretching into eternity, and then there it was, a glossy photo that made her stomach drop to her feet. David in the same navy suit he'd worn the night before, his arm around a stunning blonde woman in an elegant cream dress. They were standing in what looked like a private garden, both smiling radiantly at the camera. The woman's left hand was prominently displayed, showing off a diamond ring that probably cost more than Maya made in a year. The headline read, Sterling Enterprises CEO announces engagement to philanthropist heiress Vanessa Whitmore. Maya's vision blurred as she read the article with growing horror. The engagement had been in the works for months, and was being announced after David's return from a business trip to New York. The piece gushed about how perfect they were together. Two prominent families joining forces, shared philanthropic interests, a union that would strengthen both their business empires. There were quotes from David about how blessed he felt to have found his perfect partner, and how they were planning a spring wedding at the Whitmore family estate. Vanessa spoke about their deep connection and shared values, about how they'd known each other since childhood and had always been meant to be together. Maya read the article 3 times, each pass making the betrayal cut deeper. The timestamp showed it had been published at 8:47 a.m., less than 2 hours after David had left her bed, after he'd kissed her goodbye and promised to call. She stumbled to her bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left, her body rejecting the reality as violently as her mind was trying to. When she finally looked up at her reflection in the mirror, she saw a stranger, hollow-eyed, pale, utterly shattered. How could she have been so naive? How could she have believed that someone like David Sterling would actually want someone like her for anything more than a single night of entertainment? She'd been a mistake, a last fling before he settled down with the woman he really wanted. Someone from his own world, someone who belonged at galas and charity events by right rather than as a volunteer serving drinks and fixing broken equipment. The cruelest part was how genuine he'd seemed. The way he'd looked at her, touched her, spoken to her, it had all felt so real. But it had been an act, a performance by a man who was probably laughing about it with his fiancée right now. Poor little Maya, so grateful for his attention, so easy to seduce. Maya's phone rang, and for one wild moment her heart leaped, thinking it might be David calling to explain, to tell her this was all some terrible mistake. But it was Jessica, her voice bright with excitement. Can you believe it? I mean, I know you volunteer for that charity thing he supports, so you've probably seen him around. Isn't he gorgeous? And that ring. I looked it up, it's a 5-carat Tiffany solitaire. Can you even imagine? I have to go, Maya managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Wait, are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine. Just tired. I'll call you later. Maya hung up and immediately deleted David's number from her phone, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely hit the right buttons. She couldn't bear the thought of him calling, of having to hear his voice making excuses or worse, pretending nothing had happened between them. She spent the rest of the day in a fog of humiliation and heartbreak. Every time she closed her eyes she saw that photo, David's arm around Vanessa, both of them glowing with happiness. The happiness that should have been hers, that she'd been foolish enough to believe could be hers. The worst part was how thoroughly she'd given herself to him. Not just her body but her heart, her trust. She'd shared things with him that she'd never told anyone, had let him see parts of her soul that she'd kept carefully guarded. And he'd taken it all, used it all, then walked away to announce his engagement to someone else. Maya called in sick to work, unable to face the cheerful chaos of the daycare when her world had crumbled. She lay in bed, still able to smell David's cologne on her pillows, and cried until she had no tears left. Then she got up, stripped the bed, and threw everything into the washing machine, trying to erase every trace of the night that had meant everything to her and apparently nothing to him. Over the next few days the engagement dominated the local society pages. Photos of David and Vanessa at various events, details about their upcoming spring wedding, speculation about the merger between their families' business interests. Maya tortured herself reading every article, analyzing every photo of his smiling face for some sign that he regretted what had happened between them. There was nothing. He looked genuinely happy, completely at peace with his decision. In one particularly painful interview, he spoke about how he'd never been more certain of anything, and how Vanessa was everything he'd ever wanted in a partner. Maya realized she needed to disappear, to start over somewhere David Sterling would never accidentally encounter her again. She couldn't bear the thought of running into him at a charity event, of having to smile and pretend that night had never happened while he stood beside his beautiful fiancée. She found a smaller apartment across town, gave notice at her current job, and enrolled in different classes under her middle name. If David ever tried to find her, which seemed unlikely, he'd discover that Maya Johnson had simply vanished. 3 weeks into her new life, as she was trying to rebuild some semblance of normalcy, the nausea started. At first, Maya told herself it was stress. She was working double shifts at a new daycare to save money for next semester's tuition, and her body was probably just rebelling against the pace and the emotional trauma. But when she missed her period, something that had never happened, a cold dread settled in her stomach. She bought the pregnancy test on a Tuesday evening, her hands shaking as she placed it on the counter next to milk and bread, trying to look casual while her world tilted on its axis. The cashier, a bored teenager, didn't even glance at her purchases. Back in her new apartment, Maya stared at the test box for 20 minutes before finally opening it. The instructions seemed impossibly complicated through her panic, but eventually she managed to follow them. The 2 pink lines appeared almost instantly. Maya stared at the test for a full 10 minutes as if willing the lines to disappear. But they remained stark and undeniable. She was pregnant with David Sterling's baby, a man who was engaged to someone else and had probably forgotten her name by now. The irony was devastating. She'd given him her virginity, her heart, her complete trust, and now she was carrying his child while he planned his wedding to another woman. The baby would be a constant reminder of the most beautiful and most painful night of her life. Maya sank to her bathroom floor, the positive test clutched in her trembling hands, and made a decision that would shape the next 12 years of her life. She would keep this baby, but David Sterling would never know. He'd made his choice and it wasn't her. She wouldn't be the desperate woman who tried to trap a wealthy man with an unwanted pregnancy. She would raise this child alone, with love and dignity, and David Sterling would remain nothing more than a beautiful, painful memory. 2 months into her pregnancy, as morning sickness made her workdays at the daycare increasingly challenging, Maya made a decision that surprised even herself. She was keeping the baby. Despite her limited resources, despite the challenges ahead, she couldn't bring herself to end this pregnancy. Maybe it was the way her heart raced every time she thought about the tiny life growing inside her. Or maybe it was remembering how David had spoken about his own difficult childhood and wanting to give this child the love and stability he'd missed. But she wouldn't tell him. What was the point? He was building a life with someone else, someone who belonged in his world. The last thing he needed was a complication from a one-night stand, and the last thing Maya needed was to be seen as some kind of opportunist trying to trap a wealthy man. She would handle this alone, the way she'd handled everything else in her life. Maya threw herself into preparation with the same determination she brought to everything else. She applied for every scholarship and assistance program she could find, eventually securing enough aid to continue her education part-time. The financial aid counselor, a kind woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, helped her navigate the maze of programs available to single mothers. "You're not the first young woman to find herself in this situation," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently during one of their meetings. "And you won't be the last. The important thing is that you're being proactive, planning ahead. That tells me you're going to be just fine." Maya moved to an even smaller apartment, a tiny one-bedroom in a complex that catered to students and young families. The walls were thin and the carpet was worn, but it was clean and safe, and the rent was something she could manage on her daycare salary plus financial aid. When her pregnancy began to show, Maya crafted a careful story for her family and friends. The father was someone she'd briefly dated who'd moved away for work, a relationship that hadn't worked out but had ended amicably. She kept the details vague, deflecting questions with a sad smile and a change of subject. "What was his name, honey?" her mother asked during one of their weekly phone calls, her voice gentle with concern. "David," Maya said quietly. It was the only piece of truth she allowed herself. "Well, his loss is our gain," her mother replied firmly. "This baby is going to be so loved, sweetheart. We'll make sure of that." Maya's mother, Rose, had raised Maya alone after her father left when Maya was 5. If anyone understood the challenges ahead, it was Rose. She drove down from Portland every few weeks, bringing groceries and baby supplies, never once making Maya feel judged or ashamed. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Maya threw herself into preparing for motherhood with characteristic determination. She read every parenting book she could get from the library, took childbirth classes at the community center, and saved every penny she could toward the medical bills. Her co-workers at the daycare were supportive, sharing hand-me-down baby clothes and offering advice about everything from breastfeeding to sleep schedules. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," said Linda, the daycare director, watching Maya comfort a crying toddler with practiced ease. "You have such a natural way with children. This baby is lucky to have you." Maya's due date fell in February, and as winter settled over the city, she found herself growing increasingly excited despite her circumstances. She'd set up a small nursery in the corner of her bedroom, decorating it with cheerful yellow and green since she'd decided to wait to learn the baby's gender. She wanted some surprises left in her life, some joy that wasn't complicated by heartbreak. On a snowy February morning, 3 weeks before her due date, Maya woke to contractions that took her breath away. She'd been having false alarms for weeks, but this felt different, urgent, real, unstoppable. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 18 hours. Maya's mother held her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement and wiping her forehead with cool cloths. When the final push came, Maya summoned strength she didn't know she possessed. And then, suddenly there was crying, loud, indignant, absolutely perfect crying. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, red-faced baby on Maya's chest. Maya looked down at her daughter and felt her heart explode with love so fierce it took her breath away. The baby was beautiful, with a cap of dark hair that already showed the distinctive zigzag cowlick that marked her as unmistakably her father's child. But in that moment, Maya didn't think about David. She thought only about this perfect little person who was completely, utterly hers. "She's perfect," the nurse said softly, checking the baby's vital signs. "Look at that hair pattern, so unique. She's going to be a beauty." Maya named her Zoe because it meant life, and this little girl represented a completely new chapter for both of them. As she held her daughter for the first time, Maya made a silent promise. Zoe would never doubt that she was wanted, loved, cherished. She would never feel like a mistake or an inconvenience. The early years were harder than Maya had anticipated, but also more rewarding than she'd ever imagined. Daycare costs ate up most of her paycheck, leaving little for anything beyond basic necessities, but Maya was resourceful. She shopped at thrift stores, accepted hand-me-downs gratefully, and learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. She switched to online classes to accommodate Zoe's schedule, stretching her degree timeline but ensuring she could be present for her daughter. Some nights, after Zoe was asleep, Maya would study at her kitchen table until her eyes burned, determined to build a better future for both of them. Zoe was a bright, curious child who asked constant questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether dinosaurs had feelings. Maya answered them all as best she could, marveling at her daughter's quick mind and infectious laugh. Even during the hardest moments, when Zoe was teething and screaming at 3 in the morning, when Maya was surviving on 4 hours of sleep and instant coffee, she never regretted her decision to keep her daughter. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy like the other kids?" Zoe asked one day when she was 4, having noticed the family dynamics at her preschool. Maya had prepared for this question, but it still made her heart ache. She knelt down to Zoe's eye level, choosing her words carefully. "Some families have mommies and daddies, some have just mommies, some have just daddies, and some have grandparents or other people who love them. We have each other, and that makes us a family. But where is my daddy?" Zoe persisted with 4-year-old logic. "He's not able to be with us, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean you're missing anything. You have so many people who love you, me, Grandma Rose, Uncle Marcus, all your teachers." Zoe seemed to accept this explanation, but Maya could see the wheels turning in her daughter's bright mind. She knew more questions would come eventually, and each year they would get harder to answer. As the years passed, Maya gradually built a stable life for them. She finished her degree in social work when Zoe was 6, landing a position with the county's Child Services Department. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and the benefits finally gave them the security Maya had been working toward. They moved to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood with good schools. Maya bought her first car, a reliable used Honda that she paid for in cash after months of saving. Small victories, but they felt enormous to someone who'd started with nothing. Zoe excelled in school, showing particular aptitude for math and science. She was popular with her classmates and teachers, a natural leader with an infectious enthusiasm for learning. Maya was prouder of her daughter every day, even as certain moments made her heart clench with bittersweet recognition. When Zoe laughed really hard, she got the same crinkles around her eyes that David had. When she concentrated on homework, she unconsciously ran her fingers through that distinctive cowlick, smoothing it down in a gesture that was purely her father's. She had David's quick wit and his way of tilting her head when she was thinking through a problem. Maya never spoke about these resemblances, but she treasured them privately. They were her secret connection to a night that had changed her life forever, reminders that something beautiful had come from something painful. Occasionally, Maya would see David's name in the business section of the newspaper or catch a glimpse of him at community events. He'd built Sterling Enterprises into one of the region's most successful companies, expanding into renewable energy and educational technology. His marriage to Vanessa seemed stable. They appeared together at charity functions, and society pages mentioned their various philanthropic efforts. Maya was surprised to find that the pain had faded over the years, replaced by something more like wistful gratitude. Their one night together had given her Zoe, and she couldn't regret that, no matter how complicated the circumstances. When Zoe turned 10, she became obsessed with genealogy after a school project on family trees. She peppered Maya with questions about relatives, medical history, anything that might give her clues about her father's identity. "I know you said he can't be with us, Mama, but what if something happens to you? What if I need to know about diseases that run in families? What if he doesn't even know I exist?" That last question cut too close to home. Maya deflected as best she could, but she could see Zoe's frustration growing. Her daughter was too smart, too determined to be satisfied with vague answers forever. Maya knew that eventually the truth would have to come out. She just hadn't expected it to happen on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at Riverside Elementary, when her carefully constructed world would collide with the past she tried so hard to leave behind. Maya was running late picking up Zoe from school after a particularly difficult case had kept her at the office. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under her feet as she hurried toward the school entrance, already rehearsing her apology to Zoe for being late. But when she spotted her daughter near the flagpole, Maya's world came to a screeching halt. Zoe wasn't alone. A tall man in a business suit was crouched down to her eye level, pointing at something in her hair with what looked like fascination and wonder. Even from a distance, even after 12 years, Maya recognized David Sterling immediately. He'd aged well, his face more mature but those kind brown eyes unchanged. The same strong jawline, the same way of holding himself with quiet confidence. And he was staring at Zoe with an expression of dawning recognition that made Maya's stomach drop to her feet. She watched in horror as David reached up to touch his own head, then looked back at Zoe's distinctive cowlick pattern. The same zigzag swirl that had marked them both, that Maya had lovingly traced with her finger every night when she tucked her daughter into bed. The genetic signature that proclaimed their connection louder than any birth certificate ever could. "We match," Maya heard Zoe exclaim cheerfully, completely oblivious to the earth-shattering moment unfolding before her mother's horrified eyes. "This is so cool. I've never met anyone else with hair like mine." Maya forced herself to walk forward, her legs feeling like lead, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone in the schoolyard could hear it. David looked up as she approached, and their eyes met across the distance. The impact was immediate and devastating. She saw recognition, shock, and something that might have been joy flicker across his features in rapid succession. "Mama?" Zoe called out, turning toward her with a bright smile. "This is Mr. Sterling. He was picking up his nephew Tommy, and he noticed my hair does that funny thing like his does. See?" She turned to show David her cowlick again, her face glowing with the excitement of finding someone who shared her unique trait. "We match. Isn't that amazing?" "Yes," David said softly, his voice rough with emotion as his eyes remained locked on Maya's face. "We certainly do match." Maya felt like she was drowning in broad daylight. This was the moment she'd dreaded for 12 years, the collision of past and present that she tried so hard to prevent. David's eyes held 1,000 questions, and she could see his brilliant mind putting the pieces together with terrifying speed. "Zoe, go get in the car," Maya managed, her voice barely steady. "We need to get going." "But Mama, Mr. Sterling was telling me about how his hair used to make him self-conscious when he was little, just like mine sometimes does. He said I should be proud of what makes me unique, that it's like having a special signature that nobody else has." Maya's heart clenched. Of course David would say exactly the right thing to their daughter. Of course he would know instinctively how to make her feel special rather than different. Even without knowing who Zoe was, he'd recognized something precious in her. "Now, Zoe," Maya said more firmly, desperation creeping into her voice. Something in her mother's tone made Zoe's smile fade. She looked between the two adults, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. Her bright, perceptive eyes took in Maya's pale face, David's intense stare, the way they seemed frozen in some kind of silent communication. "It was nice meeting you, Mr. Sterling," she said politely, her natural good manners overriding her confusion. "Maybe I'll see you around sometime." "I hope so," David replied, his voice gentle but his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "I really hope so." Zoe headed toward Maya's car, glancing back once with a puzzled expression before climbing into the passenger seat. Maya watched her daughter buckle her seatbelt, buying herself a few more seconds before she had to face the conversation that would change everything. David stood slowly, never taking his eyes off Maya. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He was still devastatingly handsome, still carried himself with that quiet authority that had drawn her to him all those years ago. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that made Maya's chest tight. "I don't think that's a good idea." Maya's voice came out steadier than she felt, but her hands were shaking. Maya. Her name on his lips after all these years made her heart race with remembered pain and unwanted longing. "Please. She's mine, isn't she?" Maya glanced around frantically, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. The few remaining parents were focused on their own children, but she still felt exposed, vulnerable, like her carefully constructed life was crumbling in broad daylight. "I can't do this here." "Then where?" "When?" His voice was urgent but not demanding, respectful of her obvious distress but determined to get answers. "Maya, I've thought about you every day for 12 years. I looked for you after that night, but you'd moved, changed your number. I thought—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. "I thought you regretted what happened between us." "You were engaged," Maya whispered fiercely, the old pain flaring to life as if no time had passed at all. "The very next morning. Engaged to someone else." David's face went white, confusion and something that looked like horror flickering across his features. "What are you talking about?" "It was all over the news, David. Your engagement to Vanessa Whitmore. Announced the morning after our night together." The words tasted bitter in her mouth, 12 years of hurt and betrayal condensed into a few devastating sentences. For a long moment, David just stared at her, his expression cycling through confusion, realization, and what looked like grief. When understanding finally dawned in his eyes, it was followed immediately by something that looked like devastation. "Oh Maya. No. That engagement had been arranged by our families for months, announced while I was supposedly on a business trip. I broke it off 3 days later when I realized I couldn't marry her, couldn't stop thinking about you. The whole thing was called off within a week." Maya felt the ground shift beneath her feet, 12 years of carefully constructed reality crumbling in an instant. "But the papers said." The papers said what they always say, what our PR teams wanted them to say to save face. "Mutual decision, remain friends, different life goals." David's voice was bitter with old frustration. "I spent months looking for you, Maya. I went to every Children's Hope event hoping you'd be there. You'd disappeared completely. I moved across town. Changed my phone number. Started using my middle name at work." Maya's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I thought you were married." "I've never married anyone. Never even came close." David looked toward the car where Zoe was waiting, her face pressed against the window watching them with obvious curiosity. "She's 11? Maya nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. "Her name?" "Zoe. Zoe Johnson. She's beautiful. She looks like you but that hair." David's voice cracked slightly. "I used to hate this cowlick when I was a kid. Kids made fun of it, called me Wheatfield head because of the way it grows in that zigzag pattern. But seeing it on her, Maya, she's perfect." "I know." Tears were threatening now and Maya blinked them back fiercely. "David, I need time to think about this. She doesn't know who you are. What have you told her about her father? That he couldn't be with us. That he doesn't know she exists." Maya met his eyes, seeing her own pain reflected there. "I never wanted her to feel abandoned or unwanted. But I do want her. I want both of you. I've wanted that since the night we met." The simple sincerity in his voice nearly broke Maya's composure entirely. "I can't just drop this news on her, David. She's a child. She has questions but she's also scared of change. And Maya's voice caught. "I don't know how to do this. I've been her only parent for 12 years. I'm not asking you to give that up. I'm asking you to let me be part of it. To let me try to make up for lost time, for the support you should have had all along." David pulled out his business card, wrote something on the back and handed it to Maya. "That's my personal number. Please think about what I've said." "And Maya?" He paused, looking toward Zoe again. "Thank you. For giving her life, for raising her alone when you thought I'd abandoned you both. Thank you for making sure she knows she's loved." Maya clutched the card, her hands shaking. "This is complicated, David." "I know. But some things are worth the complications." He walked away then toward a sleek sedan where a young boy was waiting. Maya watched him go, her mind reeling with everything that had just happened. 12 years of assumptions, shattered in the span of a 10-minute conversation. 12 years of believing she'd been betrayed, when the truth was so much more complicated. "Mama?" Zoe's voice called from the car. "Are you okay? You look like you're going to cry." Maya wiped her eyes and forced a smile as she got into the driver's seat. "I'm fine, baby. Just thinking about work stuff." That night, after Zoe was asleep, Maya sat in her kitchen staring at David's business card. She thought about the past 12 years, the struggles and triumphs she'd faced alone. She thought about Zoe's questions about her father, her growing desire to understand where she came from. Most of all, she thought about the look in David's eyes when he'd said he'd never stop thinking about her, that he'd looked for her for months. The pain in his voice when he'd realized what she'd believed all these years. Maybe it was time to stop protecting them all from the truth. Maybe it was time to find out what kind of family they could build together, complicated as it might be. Maya picked up her phone and before she could lose her nerve, typed a simple message, "Coffee tomorrow? We have a lot to talk about." The response came within minutes. "Thank you. Name the place and time. I'll be there." For the first time in 12 years, Maya allowed herself to hope that their story might have a happy ending after all. Maya arrived at the small cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table where they could speak privately. She ordered coffee she didn't want and watched the door, her stomach churning with nervous energy. When David walked in, scanning the room until his eyes found hers, Maya felt that same electric jolt of recognition that had hit her 12 years ago. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept either. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and there were new lines of stress around his eyes. But when he saw her, his face softened with something that looked like relief. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said as he sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," Maya admitted. "But Zoe deserves to know the truth. We both do." David ordered coffee and they sat in awkward silence for a moment, 12 years of separation stretching between them like a chasm. Finally, David spoke. "Tell me about her. About Zoe. What's she like?" Maya's face softened as she thought about her daughter. "She's incredible. Brilliant, curious about everything. She wants to be a marine biologist one day or maybe an astronaut. It changes depending on what documentary she's watched recently. She's kind, funny, stubborn when she believes in something." Maya paused, then added quietly, "She has your laugh. And your way of tilting her head when she's thinking." David's eyes filled with emotion. "I can't believe I missed 12 years of her life. Her first steps, first words, first day of school. David, you didn't know. I made sure you didn't know." Maya's voice was heavy with the weight of her decision. "I thought you'd chosen someone else. I thought telling you would just complicate your life." "My life has been empty without you both," David said quietly. "After I broke off the engagement with Vanessa, I threw myself into work. Built the company, made more money than I could ever spend, won awards and recognition. But none of it meant anything because the one person I wanted to share it with was gone." Maya studied his face, looking for any sign of deception, but she saw only sincerity and pain. "Why didn't you try harder to find me?" "I did try. For 2 years I had people looking for you. But Maya Johnson is a common name, and when you started using your middle name professionally, the trail went completely cold. Eventually, I told myself you'd probably left the state, maybe even the country. I had to accept that you didn't want to be found." The pain in his voice made Maya's chest tight. "I'm sorry. I was hurt and scared and I thought I was protecting all of us." "We both made mistakes," David said gently. "The question is, what do we do now?" Maya took a shaky breath. "I don't know how to tell her. She's asked about her father for years, but I've always deflected. How do I explain that I kept him away because of a misunderstanding?" "We tell her together," David suggested. "We tell her the truth, that we cared about each other, that circumstances separated us, and that we're trying to figure out how to be a family now. She might be angry. At both of us. She might be. But she's also smart and loving if she's anything like her mother. She'll understand eventually." Maya felt tears threatening. "David, I need you to understand something. I've been her whole world for 12 years. I've made every decision, handled every crisis, been there for every triumph and disappointment. I can't just step aside and let you take over." "I don't want to take over," David said earnestly. "I want to learn from you. You've done an amazing job raising her alone. I can see that just from the few minutes I spent with her yesterday. She's confident, polite, curious, happy. That's all because of you. But you're her father. You have rights. I have responsibilities, David corrected. The right to be in her life is something I have to earn. From both of you. Maya studied his face, seeing the sincerity there. What do you want, David? Really? I want to know my daughter. I want to be part of her life, help with homework, attend school plays, teach her to drive someday. I want to support you both, not just financially but emotionally. I want us to be a family, however that looks. He paused, then added quietly, and I want to see if what we had 12 years ago is still there. Maya's heart skipped. David. I know it's complicated. I know we can't just pick up where we left off. But Maya, I never stopped loving you. Even when I thought you'd chosen to disappear, even when I tried to move on with other people, it was always you. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Maya felt the walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crack. I need to think about this. About all of it. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Maya, can I ask one favor? What? Can I see her again? Maybe we could all have dinner somewhere casual. I don't have to tell her who I am yet, but I'd like to spend time with her. Get to know her a little before we have the big conversation. Maya considered this. It seemed reasonable, a way to ease into the situation rather than dropping a bombshell on Zoe. Okay. But we go slow. And if she seems uncomfortable at any point, we stop. Agreed. They arranged to meet at a family restaurant the following Saturday. As they prepared to leave the cafe, David reached across the table and gently touched Maya's hand. Thank you. For giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. We all deserve a chance to make things right, Maya said softly. Saturday arrived faster than Maya expected. She changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple blue dress that Zoe declared perfect. Zoe herself had chosen her favorite outfit, a purple sweater and jeans with her hair pulled back in a ponytail that showed off her distinctive cowlick. David was already waiting when they arrived at the restaurant, and Maya's heart did that familiar skip when she saw him. He dressed casually, khakis and a button-down shirt, but he still looked every inch the successful businessman. When he saw them approaching, his face lit up with genuine joy. Zoe. I'm so glad you could come, he said, standing to greet them. Thanks for inviting us, Mr. Sterling. Mama said you don't have much family here. That must be lonely. David's eyes met Maya's over Zoe's head, and she saw the emotion there. It has been lonely. But I'm hoping that might change. Dinner was a revelation. David was wonderful with Zoe, asking about her interests, listening intently to her stories about school and friends. He told her about his work in renewable energy, explaining complex concepts in ways that made her eyes light up with understanding. So you're basically helping save the planet? Zoe asked, clearly impressed. I'm trying to. It's important work, but it's even more important when I think about the world we're leaving for the next generation. Maya watched them together, seeing the easy rapport developing between father and daughter. Zoe was completely at ease with David, chattering away about her marine biology dreams and her latest science project. David hung on every word, asking thoughtful questions and sharing his own childhood fascination with the ocean. I always wanted to be a marine biologist too, David admitted. But I got sidetracked by business. Maybe you can teach me about ocean conservation sometime. Really? That would be awesome. I have tons of books about coral reefs and whale migration patterns. I'd love to see them. As the evening progressed, Maya found herself relaxing for the first time in days. This felt natural, right? Like the family they could have been all along. After dinner, as they walked to their cars, Zoe surprised them both. Mr. Sterling, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think my daddy would be proud of me? Mama says he can't be with us, but sometimes I wonder if he knows about me, if he'd like the person I'm becoming. Maya's heart stopped. David knelt down to Zoe's eye level, his voice gentle but firm. Zoe, any father would be incredibly proud to have a daughter like you. You're smart, kind, and curious about the world. You care about important things like protecting the ocean. Be respectful to adults and clearly love your mother very much. Trust me, your father would be the proudest man in the world. Zoe beamed at him. Thanks, Mr. Sterling. That makes me feel better. As they said their goodbyes, David caught Maya's eye. Soon? He asked quietly. Maya nodded. Soon. She deserves to know. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. David would pick Zoe up from school twice a week, helping with homework and taking her to dinner. On weekends, they would spend time together as a family, going to museums, hiking, or simply hanging out at David's house. Maya watched in amazement as David embraced fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else. He learned Zoe's schedule, her favorite foods, her friends' names. He attended her school science fair and cheered louder than anyone when she won second place. He read every book about marine biology he could find so he could keep up with her passion for ocean conservation. But it was the quiet moments that touched Maya's heart the most. David teaching Zoe to play chess, both of them frowning in concentration with identical expressions. David braiding Zoe's hair for school, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he worked. Zoe falling asleep against David's shoulder during a movie, both of them looking completely content. As for Maya and David, they were rediscovering each other slowly, carefully. The attraction was still there, stronger than ever, if anything, but they were both determined to build something lasting this time. They talked for hours about everything they'd missed, sharing stories from the past 12 years, dreams for the future. "I never stopped loving you," David told her one evening as they sat on his back porch while Zoe played in the garden. "Even when I thought you'd chosen to leave, even when I tried to convince myself to move on. It was always you." "I loved you too," Maya admitted. "I tried so hard to hate you, to convince myself that what we had wasn't real. But every time I looked at Zoe, I saw you. I saw the man who had been so gentle with me, so kind. I couldn't reconcile that with someone who would abandon us. We lost so much time," David said sadly. "But we found each other again. That's what matters." It was during this period of rebuilding that Maya made a decision that would nearly destroy everything they'd worked for. She decided it was time to tell Zoe the truth about her father. But before she could arrange the conversation with David, fate intervened in the cruelest possible way. Maya was at work when her assistant knocked on her door, looking troubled. "Maya, there's a courier here with some legal documents for you. He says you need to sign for them personally." Maya's blood ran cold as she accepted the certified envelope. The Sterling family law firm's letterhead was embossed in gold, and the contents were devastating. A formal petition for custody of Zoe Sterling, filed by David Sterling as the biological father, claiming Maya Johnson was an unfit mother who had deliberately kept his child from him for 12 years. Maya's hands trembled as she read the legal document. The signature at the bottom was unmistakably David's. She'd seen him sign enough school forms and permission slips over the past few weeks to recognize his distinctive handwriting. The petition painted her as a manipulative woman who had trapped a wealthy man with a secret pregnancy, then disappeared to extort money later. It claimed she was financially unstable, had provided an inadequate home environment, and had psychologically damaged the child by lying about her father's identity. But the cruelest part was a personal note attached, written on David's personal letterhead. "Maya, I'm sorry it has to be this way, but Zoe deserves better than what you can provide. She belongs with her real family now. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. David." Maya sank into her office chair, the papers scattered across her desk like the remnants of her shattered dreams. How could she have been so naive? How could she have believed that David Sterling had actually changed, that he could love someone like her? Rich people didn't change. They just got better at hiding their true nature. When her phone rang with David's ringtone, Maya stared at it with disgust before declining the call. It rang again immediately. And again. By the fifth call, Maya turned the phone off entirely. That evening, when Zoe asked why Daddy wasn't coming for dinner as planned, Maya had to excuse herself to the bathroom to cry. How was she supposed to tell her 12-year-old daughter that the father she'd just learned to love was trying to take her away? "Mama, you're scaring me," Zoe said when Maya finally emerged, her eyes red and swollen. "What's wrong? Where's Daddy?" The word Daddy hit Maya like a physical blow. Zoe had started calling David that just last week, and he'd cried with joy when she did. Now it felt like a knife twisting in Maya's heart. "Sweetheart, we need to talk." Maya sat down beside her daughter, her heart breaking at the trust and innocence in Zoe's eyes. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that hurt the people they're supposed to love. "What kind of decisions?" Maya took a shaky breath. "David has decided that he wants you to live with him instead of me." Zoe's face went white. "What? But I don't want to live without you, Mama. I want us all to live together like a real family." "I know, baby. I know. Can't you just tell him no? You're my mom." Maya pulled Zoe into her arms, holding her tight as her daughter began to cry. "It's more complicated than that, sweetheart. David has lawyers and they're going to try to convince a judge that you'd be better off with him. But that's not true. You're the best mom in the world. You've taken care of me my whole life." "I know, baby. And I'm going to fight for you. I promise." Over the next few days, David's calls and texts became increasingly desperate. Maya deleted them all without reading or listening. She couldn't bear to hear his voice making excuses, trying to justify what he was doing to their family. Maya hired the best family attorney she could afford, which wasn't saying much on a social worker's salary. Jennifer Walsh was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in custody cases involving wealthy fathers. "I have to be honest with you, Maya," Jennifer said during their first meeting. "David Sterling has unlimited resources. He can drag this out for years, appeal every decision, make your life hell. Are you prepared for that?" "He's not taking my daughter," Maya said firmly. "I don't care what it costs or how long it takes." "Good. Because we're going to need character witnesses, documentation of your relationship with Zoe, proof that you've been a good mother. We need to show the court that despite his money, you're the better parent." Meanwhile, David was going out of his mind trying to reach Maya. He'd shown up at her apartment building, but the security guard wouldn't let him up. He'd gone to her workplace, but she'd refused to see him. He'd even tried waiting outside Zoe's school, but Maya had apparently made arrangements for someone else to pick her up. "What the hell is going on?" David demanded when he stormed into his mother's office at Sterling Enterprises. "Maya won't take my calls, won't see me. Zoe's not at school when I try to pick her up. It's like they've disappeared." Eleanor Sterling looked up from her desk with cool satisfaction. "Perhaps she's finally realized that she doesn't belong in our world, darling." "What did you do, Mother?" "I did what was necessary to protect this family's interests." David's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" Eleanor opened her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "I had our attorneys file for custody of your daughter. It's time that child was raised properly, with the advantages that come with the Sterling name." "You did what?" David's voice was a roar that made his mother's assistant peek nervously through the door. "Don't take that tone with me, David. That woman kept your child from you for 12 years. She's clearly unfit. I never authorized any custody filing. You had no right." Eleanor's smile was cold and triumphant. "Actually, I did. As your mother and a concerned grandmother, I have every right to petition for custody of my granddaughter. Especially when her mother is clearly using her to manipulate you." David stared at his mother in horror. "Maya thinks I filed for custody. That's why she won't talk to me." "Good. Maybe now she'll disappear again and save us all the trouble of a court battle." "You forged my signature, didn't you?" David's voice was deadly quiet. "You made it look like the petition came from me." Eleanor didn't deny it. "I did what was best for this family. That child belongs with us, not with some gold-digging social worker who—" David slammed his hand on his mother's desk so hard that her coffee cup jumped. "That woman is the love of my life, and that child is my daughter. If you think I'm going to let you destroy my family again, you're insane. David, be reasonable. Think about what you're throwing away." "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what matters." David straightened his tie, his decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. "I'm going to that hearing, Mother. And I'm going to tell the judge exactly what kind of people you really are." Eleanor's face went pale. "You wouldn't dare." "Watch me." The family court hearing was scheduled for a gray Monday morning in November. Maya sat in the sterile courtroom beside her attorney, trying to keep her hands from shaking. Across the aisle, the Sterling family's legal team occupied an entire row, 3 attorneys in expensive suits, armed with briefcases full of documents designed to prove she was an unfit mother. Eleanor Sterling sat in the front row behind her lawyers, dressed in an elegant navy suit that probably cost more than Maya's monthly salary. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, every inch the picture of refined wealth and respectability. She looked like the kind of grandmother any judge would want to award custody to. Maya had barely slept in the 2 weeks since receiving the custody papers. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw David's signature on those documents, heard his voice in her head saying Zoe deserved better than what she could provide. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she'd experienced, even deeper than finding out about his supposed engagement 12 years ago. "Remember," Jennifer whispered as they waited for the judge to enter, "stay calm, answer only what's asked, and don't let them provoke you. They're going to try to paint you as emotional and unstable." Maya nodded, glancing back at the gallery where her mother sat with Zoe. Her daughter looked terrified, clutching her grandmother's hand and staring at the imposing courtroom with wide, frightened eyes. Maya had tried to explain what was happening in age-appropriate terms, but how do you tell a 12-year-old that her father wants to take her away from the only parent she's ever known? "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison," the bailiff announced. Judge Morrison was a stern-looking woman in her 60s with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She settled behind the bench and reviewed the case file with practiced efficiency. This is a petition for custody modification in the matter of Sterling versus Johnson, regarding the minor child Zoe Johnson, Judge Morrison began. I understand this is an unusual case involving a child whose paternity was recently established. Mr. Hendricks, you may present your opening statement on behalf of the petitioner. The lead Sterling attorney, a silver-haired man who radiated expensive confidence, stood and approached the bench. Your Honor, this case is about a child who has been deliberately kept from her father's family for 12 years. My client, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, is seeking custody of her granddaughter Zoe on behalf of her son, David Sterling, who only recently discovered the child's existence. Maya's stomach churned as Hendricks painted her as a manipulative woman who had trapped a wealthy man and then disappeared to avoid responsibility. He spoke about the Sterling family's resources, their ability to provide Zoe with the best education, healthcare, and opportunities that money could buy. The respondent, Ms. Johnson, is a single mother working as a social worker, living in a modest apartment with limited means. While we don't question her love for the child, love alone cannot provide the advantages that the Sterling family can offer. This child deserves to know her heritage, to be raised with the privileges and opportunities that come with the Sterling name. When it was Jennifer's turn, she stood with quiet dignity. Your Honor, this case is not about money or privilege. It's about a mother who has raised her daughter alone for 12 years, providing a loving, stable home environment. Zoe Johnson is a happy, well-adjusted child who excels in school and has strong bonds with her mother and extended family. To remove her from the only home she's ever known would be traumatic and harmful to her well-being. The proceedings continued with witness testimony. Eleanor Sterling took the stand first, presenting herself as the concerned grandmother who only wanted what was best for her granddaughter. She spoke eloquently about the Sterling family's philanthropic work, their commitment to education, their desire to provide Zoe with opportunities she could never have otherwise. Mrs. Sterling, Jennifer said during cross-examination, when did you first learn of Zoe's existence? Approximately 3 weeks ago when my son informed the family. And how long after learning about her did you file this custody petition? Eleanor's composure slipped slightly. We felt it was important to act quickly in the child's best interests. So within days of learning you had a granddaughter, your first instinct was to try to take her away from her mother? Objection, Hendricks called out. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Morrison ruled, but Maya could see the judge was paying close attention. Maya's turn on the stand was grueling. The Sterling attorneys questioned every aspect of her life. Her finances, her work schedule, her dating history, her decision to keep Zoe's paternity secret. They made her sound irresponsible, vindictive, and motivated by greed. Ms. Johnson, Hendricks said with barely concealed disdain, isn't it true that you only revealed Mr. Sterling's paternity when you discovered his wealth and success? No, that's not true. I never intended to tell him at all. We only met by accident at Zoe's school. How convenient. And now you're engaged to Mr. Sterling, correct? Maya's heart clenched. We were engaged. That's over now. Because he chose his family's interests over yours? Objection. Jennifer stood quickly. Relevance. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said, her eyes fixed on Maya. Maya took a shaky breath. Because I discovered he filed for custody behind my back while pretending to love us both. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her machine. Maya could feel Eleanor Sterling's satisfied smile from across the room. As the morning wore on, Maya felt her hopes slipping away. The Sterling attorneys were skilled, their arguments polished, their resources unlimited. How could she compete with that? Then, just as Judge Morrison was about to call for a lunch recess, the courtroom doors burst open. David Sterling strode down the center aisle, his face thunderous, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His tie was askew, his hair messed from running his hands through it, and his eyes blazed with fury. Your Honor, he called out, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned courtroom. I need to address this court immediately. The entire room erupted. Eleanor Sterling went white as a sheet. The attorneys began talking over each other. Judge Morrison banged her gavel repeatedly. Order. Order in my courtroom. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Sterling, I presume? You're out of order. Take a seat and wait your turn. Your Honor, with all due respect, I can't wait. This entire proceeding is based on fraud. David's voice was steady now, but Maya could see the rage simmering beneath the surface. I never filed for custody of my daughter. I never authorized any legal action against Ms. Johnson. My signature was forged. The courtroom exploded again. Eleanor Sterling looked like she might faint. Hendricks was frantically whispering to his colleagues. Maya felt her world tilt as David's words sank in. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Morrison said sternly, "these are serious allegations. Are you saying you did not sign the custody petition?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, Your Honor. My mother forged my signature and filed this petition without my knowledge or consent. I've been trying to reach Ms. Johnson for 2 weeks to explain, but she understandably won't speak to me because she believes I betrayed her." David turned to look directly at Maya, his eyes filled with pain and desperation. "Maya, I would never try to take Zoe away from you. You're the most incredible mother I've ever seen. Our daughter is lucky to have you, and so am I." Maya felt tears streaming down her face as the truth crashed over her. David hadn't betrayed them. He'd been as much a victim of his mother's manipulation as they had been. Judge Morrison was studying the custody documents with new interest. "Mr. Hendricks, did your client inform you that she was filing this petition without her son's knowledge?" Hendricks looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Your Honor, we were led to believe that Mr. Sterling was unable to file personally due to business commitments." "That's a lie," David said flatly. "My mother told me nothing about this filing. I discovered it purely by accident when I confronted her about why Maya wouldn't speak to me." Eleanor Sterling finally found her voice. "David, you don't understand what that woman is doing to you." "What I understand, Mother, is that you forged legal documents and destroyed my relationship with the woman I love and the daughter I adore." David's voice was ice cold. "What I understand is that you're so desperate to control my life that you're willing to traumatize a 12-year-old child." Judge Morrison set down the documents and fixed Eleanor Sterling with a withering stare. "Mrs. Sterling, if these allegations are true, you have committed fraud upon this court. Mr. Hendricks, I'm dismissing this petition immediately. Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into the circumstances of this filing." "Your Honor," David said, his voice gentler now, "I'd like to make a statement for the record." "Proceed." David looked at Maya, then at Zoe in the gallery, then back at the judge. "Your Honor, I love Maya Johnson and our daughter Zoe more than anything in this world. Maya has been an extraordinary mother, raising our daughter alone while I was absent through no fault of my own. If anyone is unfit in this situation, it's the Sterling family for trying to tear apart a loving family for their own selfish purposes." He turned to face his mother directly. "I renounce any claim to the Sterling inheritance or business interests. I choose my real family, Maya and Zoe, over the people who would hurt them." The courtroom was dead silent. Eleanor Sterling looked like she'd been slapped. Maya was crying openly now, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "Furthermore," David continued, "I'm prepared to sign any legal document necessary to ensure that my mother and the Sterling family have no claim to custody or visitation rights regarding my daughter. They've proven today that they cannot be trusted with a child's well-being." Judge Morrison nodded slowly. "Mr. Sterling, your statement is noted for the record. This petition is dismissed with prejudice. Mrs. Sterling, you will be hearing from the district attorney's office regarding the forged documents." As the gavel came down, Maya felt like she could breathe for the first time in 2 weeks. David had chosen them. He'd chosen love over money, family over fortune, truth over manipulation. But before she could process what happened next, Zoe broke free from her grandmother's hand and ran down the aisle toward David. "Daddy," she cried, throwing herself into his arms. "I was so scared they were going to take me away from Mama." David caught her, holding her tight as tears streamed down his face. "Never, Princess. I will never let anyone take you away from your mother. We're a family, all 3 of us, and nothing will ever change that." Maya stood on shaky legs, Jennifer's hand steadying her as she made her way toward David and Zoe. When she reached them, David looked up at her with eyes full of love and regret. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what she was going to go through with it. I've been going crazy trying to reach you." "I know," Maya whispered, reaching out to touch his face. "I know now. I should have trusted you. You had every reason not to trust me. My family has hurt you twice now. But Maya, I swear to you, I will never let them hurt you or Zoe again." David stood, still holding Zoe, and faced Maya fully. "I meant what I said in there. I choose you. I choose our family. I don't need their money or their approval. All I need is you and Zoe. But your company, your inheritance. I'll build something new. Something that's ours, that's clean. Maya, I've been successful before and I can be successful again. But I can't be happy without you." Maya looked at this man who had just given up everything for her and their daughter, who had stood up to his own family in a courtroom full of people, who had chosen love over everything else he'd ever known. "I love you," she whispered. "I never stopped loving you." David's face broke into the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen. "I love you too. Both of you. Forever." He leaned down and kissed her then, right there in the courtroom, while Zoe giggled and the few remaining spectators applauded. It was a kiss that tasted of tears and hope and new beginnings. 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Maya walked down the aisle of a small chapel surrounded by family and friends. Zoe served as her maid of honor, beaming with pride in her pale pink dress. David waited at the altar, looking more handsome than ever in his black tuxedo, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. David had been true to his word. He'd started his own renewable energy company, Sterling Johnson Enterprises, with Maya as his equal partner. The business was thriving, built on the foundation of their shared values and commitment to making the world better for the next generation. Eleanor Sterling had been charged with fraud and forgery. The scandal had rocked the Sterling family empire, but David felt no regret. He'd built something better, something honest, something that would make Zoe proud to carry on their legacy. The ceremony was simple but perfect. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to cherish the family they had found, to never let misunderstandings come between them again, and to love each other through whatever challenges life might bring. "You may kiss the bride," the minister announced, and David did, thoroughly and joyfully, while Zoe cheered and the congregation applauded. At the reception, David gave a speech that left hardly a dry eye in the room. 13 years ago, I met a woman who changed my life in a single evening. I thought I had lost her forever, but love has a way of bringing people back together when they're meant to be. Maya, you gave me the greatest gift imaginable, not just your love but our daughter. Zoe, you are the light of my life, and I promise to spend every day making up for the time we lost. To my new family, this is just the beginning of our happily ever after. As they danced their first dance as a married couple, Maya looked around at their wedding reception, at Zoe dancing with David's brother, the only Sterling family member who had supported their relationship, at their friends and family celebrating their love, at the life they had built together from the ashes of heartbreak and misunderstanding. No regrets. David whispered in her ear as they swayed to the music. Maya looked up at her husband, this man who had waited 12 years to find her again, who had embraced fatherhood with such joy and dedication, who loved her and their daughter with his whole heart. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. We have our family, we have our love, and we have the rest of our lives to make new memories together." "I love you, Mrs. Sterling Johnson," David said, spinning her around as the song ended. "I love you too, Mr. Sterling Johnson. Both of you. Forever." As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a family trip to Hawaii where Zoe could finally see the coral reefs she'd been studying, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Sometimes the greatest love stories began with the most painful misunderstandings. Sometimes you had to lose everything to realize what truly mattered. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, love really did find a way. Their story had come full circle, from a magical night that created life, through years of separation and heartbreak, to a reunion that proved some bonds are too strong to break. Maya, David, and Zoe Sterling Johnson were finally the family they were always meant to be. Love, forgiveness, and second chances, these are the forces that can transform our lives in the most beautiful ways. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who believes in true love, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the power of family, hope, and happily ever after. Remember, it's never too late for love to find its way home. And as they drove away from their wedding reception, with Zoe chattering excitedly about their upcoming honeymoon and David's hand warm in hers, Maya knew that some fairy tales really do come true. They just take a little longer than expected to reach their happy ending.